So, what would you say creates an inability to say no for so many people that might be watching right now?
Um, the inability to say no comes directly from childhood and parenting. And you can think of it this way. The child who's invisible, who had no voice, or like with me, I'll never forget. It was just before my dad died, and I'd go visit him because we knew he was dying, and we just got to talking about childhood. And he goes, Kenny, of all the kids, you were the easiest. And that right there, like he didn't understand the weight of that, but because of what I do, what that meant was I had no voice. I didn't have needs and wants. I was not allowed to have my own morals and values, my own view of the world. And so a child who grows up invisible, and they recognize that to fit into the family system, I mean, each child will create their own adaptation once they become conscious around 6 or 7 years old of, oh, here's how I'm going to get attention from mom and dad. Some become the black sheep, others become people pleasers who can't say no. And so they're not allowed to have needs and wants. They have to be easy. And so it becomes a patterned response to do what's called give yourself away. And we become uber nice. But underneath that, we sit in silent resentment because we're going against ourselves. While we don't know what our morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables are, like we think we do, but they're really just adapted from what our parents wanted. But deep down, our authentic self knows, and that's why we keep score. If eventually, like in relationships, we'll be the type who keeps scores, throws it in somebody else's face, all the things we've done for them and how they haven't done it for us, and then we resent it. So we end up saying yes to all these things we want to say no to, but we were never allowed to say no and protect ourselves. And so most codependents on this side of the scale um, aren't even aware that that's where it came from and that's what they're doing. So they
Yes.
basically became a chameleon. They just adapted and they'll become whatever you want. And so as an adult, they'll choose even careers and relationships where they can repeat that same dynamic so they can relive that silent resentment that's never been healed. And they can't stand up for themselves. They're actually, I talk about this in my latest book. We're actually doing that to give us an opportunity to see the pain from the past we need to address, but no one's taught us how to see that, and so we miss it, and we think they're the problem. But we're stuck in, we've talked about this in other sessions you've had me on, the worst day cycle, which we all get stuck in childhood, and we just relive our trauma against ourselves.
Yes. And so okay, because of that, like people watching right now might be in that worst day cycle. And I can so personally relate to that in so many ways, all those adaptations, all those coping mechanisms built over time to lead me as a 45-year-old adult woman often not knowing who I am authentically.
Yeah,
So I
it's how my first wife was physically and verbally abusive. I literally didn't know I could say no. I just didn't. I couldn't say no to anyone or anything. It just never crossed my mind. And like she loved to go garage sailing. I hated it. I'm like, why would you want to go pick through people's trash? But I would do it. And I'd sit there and then get passive aggressive and pouty. And there's the resentment. And I'm keeping score. And, of look, I'm doing this for you. I expect something in return. And that's what childhood teaches us. We have no voice. Our needs and wants are invisible. And to even express them is a problem. And so I picked a partner just like that, that if I ever expressed, my dissatisfaction with something, man, I got clobbered at how selfish I am. And yet I made no requests through the relationship. I didn't know how to. So, but I can, I say this all the time. I can take somebody who hasn't done the recovery work, put them in a room with 20,000 people, just one person that's going to relive that dynamic from childhood. They'll come out and say, oh my God, they're all attractive, they're funny, whatever characteristics they like. And they'll say, but there's something about this one. I just have this feeling about them. And that's the one who will treat them just like they experienced in childhood.
Yeah, it's so true. Yep. I get flashbacks to some of my previous relationships in my 20s where I was dating my father over and over again. He was an alcoholic and I dated many alcoholics and yeah, whatever that little thing was in there that was yep, letting me know it was like an attraction to something that obviously was extremely unhealthy for me and yet felt so warm and fuzzy at the same
Home.
time.
It's home. It's what we know. Our brain gets addicted. We create an emotional chemical addiction to repeat the emotional experiences of childhood. And since nearly, well, 70%, minimum of 70% are negative, disempowering, and shaming, we just relive it. It feels like home. And so we will, our brain and body, if we ever see, smell, touch, or taste, or hear something we've never experienced before, we immediately go into denial. It creates the fear mechanism, we push it away. And so a person who doesn't have those qualities, we're like, yeah, I don't know, something feels off about them. I don't like them. Well, that's a person who isn't going to treat us that way. And so that's what the recovery process is we develop a skew and we have to, one, become aware that we're caught in that skew and then do the recovery process to create a new emotional neural pathway that this becomes what our brain and body basically becomes addicted to, something that works for us, not against us.
Will you take us through I think it's a 5-step process that will help answer this question of like how we don't
Yeah.
know how to say no. So how do we say no and it actually works?
Yeah, this changed my life when I figured out, part of it was something I learned from my counselor, and then, I added steps to it. And there's a lot to this. Before we get to the actual 5 steps, what I encourage people to do is first make a list of all the things, people, places, and things you can't say no to. Just do it over a week or two because there'll be hundreds of things for most people. Once you do that, then categorize them from what would be the least hardest to say no to the most difficult. All right. Now, once you have that, this is the 5-step process, and it has 2 magic phrases that will transform your life and work every time. The first step to this, you use the first magic phrase. So whenever anyone makes any type of request of you, instead of saying yes or no, your response is, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Because we're as soon as that request comes in, we drop into the child mode and we just say yes. Even we're sitting there for many people going, oh God, I don't want to do this. But it's that emotional chemical addiction. So we buy ourselves time and we start off with, let me think about this and I'll get back to you. The reason it's magic is no matter what they say, well, what do you mean you got to think about it? That's a great question. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Well, what is it you're going to think about it? Oh my God, another great question. Let me think about that and I'll get back to you. The point is this: it moves us into maturity and moderation into adulthood. Does an adult ever have to explain themselves? No. They have a right to have their thoughts and feelings. Only a child feels like they have to explain to mom and dad why it's justified that they need time to think about it. So it immediately pulls us out of that child state into adulthood and buys us time. Now, once we do that, then there are 3 questions we have to ask ourselves before we consider saying yes or no. The first one is, will I ever keep score that I did this for them? The second is, will I ever throw it in their face that I did this for them? Or 3, will I have resentment if I do this for them or agree to this? Now, all of those are kind of the same, but all of us kind of use one or the other, or in my case, all 3. So what you're going to find by asking those 3 questions, and you can look at your list and think back through your life, and you're going to see almost everything you said yes to. You kept score, you brought it up in the future and threw it in their face that you did this for them, and you sat in silent resentment. What that means is that all of those things you said yes to They went against your morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. You gave yourself away. And this is what our childhood taught us. This is the sad part. All of that is manipulative and controlling because we're trying to buy their love. We're trying to go, see, I did this. Now, will you see me? Will I stop being invisible? Will you notice me? We're looking for something. It is a conditional yes. We want something in return, and that's why it's manipulative. And so we have to get into truth and reality, not that we're a bad person, but our childhood taught us to manipulate and control people from that victim position by saying yes. And so we got trained to constantly put ourselves in that disempowered victim position. It's just become normalized. And so we have to get into reality, which is stage 3 of codependence recovery, is getting out of the fantasy of who we are into the reality of how we are truly interacting with the world, and recognize I'm just perfectly imperfect. This is something I was trained to do, but I can, now that I'm aware, I can do something about it. So let's say, the request came in and you think one of those 3 things will happen, then your answer has to be no. But you don't say no. Think about it. When someone says no to you, Andy, what do you instantly feel and sort of picture?
I feel surprised, maybe,
Okay.
especially if it was just a no with a period at the end and no other justification or
Okay.
explanation.
Does it feel kind of hurtful, or like maybe your request was bad or wrong, or you were somehow you're deficient your request, and you immediately go into some sort of sense of you were to blame or at fault for bringing it up?
Yes, I definitely have done that a number of times for sure.
All right. Now, remember the first time you heard no, who said it to you, and what did it generally look and sound like?
I have no idea who it was, but it was probably one of my parents.
For most of us, the way we learned about no is no, stop, don't do that. And that's why we instantly get that negative feeling when someone says no to us, because we're reliving childhood and the shame that was dumped into us, because we don't teach parents that what we want to do is not shame the child, but teach the child, how to navigate that situation. But parents are perfectly imperfect. So they sent the message that if you have needs and wants, especially for people in this dynamic, if you have needs and wants, that's not okay. You're bad for having them. So that's why we never say no to somebody. Instead, we use magic phrase number 2. I've thought about it and it just doesn't work for me. Now, this is magic for a couple reasons. One, it has nothing to do with them. Like we just discussed, when we hear no, we think it's all about us. Well, I didn't mention them. I just told them about me. This doesn't work for me. So, what that also does is part of the inability to say no is there were no boundaries in our home, and we've lost what's called our internal boundary. And so we're contingent upon others' approval. Well, I'm just sharing about me. I'm not bringing you into this at all. So it helps us with that part of codependence recovery. The other thing it does is, again, just like magic phrase number 1, no matter what they come back with, we never have to explain ourselves. That's one of the biggest reasons people can't say no, because just like a child, they feel they have to create a great argument to prove why this is a good reason to say no. Instead, it's, well, what do you mean it doesn't work for you? Just doesn't work for me. Well, what part of it doesn't work for you? Just doesn't work for me. Or you could bounce back to magic phrase number 1, let me think about that. I'll get back to you. The point is you're an adult. If it doesn't work for you, you get to have that. You get to have your morals and values. You get to have your needs and wants, your negotiables and non-negotiables. You don't have to prove them to somebody else or get their permission. You get to set those for yourself. And that's why the key to this are those 2 magic phrases, using it that way, because then you can always protect yourself from, that mother and father who are still trying to control you and get you to take care of them. Mom, I just thought about it and that just doesn't work for me. Well, don't you love your mother? Sounds like you'd really like some approval from me, Mom. I can give you that. Well, aren't you going to do it for me? It just doesn't work for me, Mom. But I thought you loved me. Oh, I do love you, Mom. You see, you don't get sucked in to chasing them because that's what they're so good at doing. Okay.
Good. I love it. And thanks for that that example for anyone who has a similar conversation with their own parent or someone else in their life for sure. Yeah, I also love that you talked about those internal boundaries. Man, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you could say about how we cultivate those if we just have no freaking clue what our own edges are or where we end and another begins?
That goes back to the same dynamic of learning we're invisible and we don't matter. And so we never developed our morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. So we don't have an inner container. Here's the difficulty. Almost everyone I talk to, whether they think they're codependent or not, they all think they know what their morals and values and needs and wants and negotiables and non-negotiables are. I have not met a single person who hasn't been through decades of recovery that actually knows what they are. They're just modeling what they went through. Plus, they don't really know the definitions of each one. So let me go through that. And this is what creates our internal boundaries. So we know what to say yes or no to. If we don't do this, work is critical if we want to be able to use that 5-step process. So the first thing is the difference between a moral and value. Most people think their morals are the things they believe in. A moral is just whether you think something is good or bad. Your values are what you believe in. So let's say you, I don't know, are a vegetarian. Your value is to only eat things that grow in the earth. And so you would see it as morally good to eat vegetables. You would see eating meat as morally bad. So your belief around meat is that it's morally bad for you. All right. And so what we have to do is go through our entire life. And relationships, every aspect of it. What's your moral and value around finances? Who pays the bills? Um, what kind of savings do you have? How do you invest? What are your thoughts and feelings on marriage? Do you believe you should live together? Is it okay to be intimate before marriage or after marriage? What about parenting style? How would you discipline a child? What kind of schooling would they go to? Like, there are millions of morals and values. Most people don't even know that. And the perfect example of this in almost every couple that I work with, they come to me because they have a fundamental issue between morals and values. And those morals and values were present at day one. But because they had to give themselves away as a child, they did it. An example comes to my mind. A woman had been married 18 years. She got in touch. She was frustrated because her husband smokes pot and he won't quit. And so I asked her, how'd you guys meet? Oh, it was great. It was at this house party. It was kind of a block party. And I went through the garage, turned the corner, and there he was. He was with a bunch of friends smoking a joint and having fun. And he was just so attractive. And I was like, did you hear what you just said? He did it from day one. But she learned as a child she had no voice. She couldn't have her own morals and values, needs and wants. And so something that was, she didn't know that pot smoking was non-negotiable. And so she picked somebody who went against everything she believes in. Now she's blaming him and wants him to change because that's what she got taught by her parents. And so that's why this step is critical of knowing our morals and values, needs and wants. I have 3 videos on my codependence playlist on my YouTube channel, which walk you through it, that give you a beginning. I urge everybody to really do that work. The next thing is our needs and wants. Needs are things we need to survive: food, clothing, shelter, money, physical and emotional connection. Wants are things that bring us joy. When we grow up in this dynamic, what most people do is they pursue their wants at the expense of their joys. These are people with credit card debt. So because they give themselves away, they don't know what their true needs and wants are. They buy things or they do things that sacrifice their needs and they can't meet their needs. So this is a whole nother process of going through everything, figuring what those are and learning how to meet our needs and wants ourselves instead of putting our partner in a position to be the parent we never had and demand that they do it for us. Finally, negotiables and non-negotiables are pretty straightforward. Um, are there certain, like for me, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm perfectly fine dating somebody or marrying somebody who has a drink here and there. But any drug at all, like I know everybody smokes pot, non-negotiable, won't have it, any drug at all, won't go near it. So they could have everything else, I'm done, won't have it. And so we need to know what those things are, especially before we get in a relationship when we're dating and all of that. And not knowing that, you get back to that internal boundary. I have this thing to show you here. This is not knowing our morals and values, needs and wants. That's what creates the codependence. You can see these two circles. These are, represent two individual people. The codependent dynamic is where they intersect. And this is how most people get in trouble is they expect their partner to constantly meet their needs and wants. But do you see what you lose? You lose who you are as a person. There's no interdependence. You're totally dependent on the other person to make you think, feel, behave, and enjoy your life. Well, when we have, to back to your question of internal boundaries, when we know what our internal boundaries are, we can meet our own needs and wants. We can follow our own morals and values. And when we have the emotional reserves, each person makes an emotional or physical or intellectual or spiritual or physical intimacy deposit into this shared relational space. When this person is unable to, they say, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. Well, then this person is able to exercise all of these things on their own because they have internal boundaries. A person without internal boundaries demands their partner live here with them. And that you can see the loss of life that happens. And this is why most relationships fail is basically you're asking someone else to be the parent you never had. And that's our job.
Mhm. I so love that. And you pretty much described my adult life of relationships and oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
I that was me. Like the only reason I know any of this is because it's all me. I've had to work on it for decades.
Yeah, I appreciate that diagram. That was really, really helpful to really get that. And I so get like I love how the codependent part was this smaller piece and representing all the what's lost, all of us, all of who we really are, our
Well,
authenticity.
here's the other thing is I don't have an issue if this piece is bigger, but like for me, see, I am primarily the disempowered codependent who's more on the love addict side, which means while I was enmeshed with and abandoned, my primary wound is abandonment. And so that makes me more the clingy, emotional type. Okay. So I need much more intersection. The person who's primarily enmeshed with and mildly abandoned, they're on what's called the love avoidance side of codependence. They're the falsely empowered, what our society thinks has their act together. All right. Well, they want very little intersection because emotional intimacy for them is scary to death because they were enmeshed with. And so they were used emotionally by their parents. So they do everything they can to avoid intimacy and connection. Well, my mother was an alcoholic and she'd be sober 4 to 6 weeks and was amazing. And then she'd be in a walking coma for 7 to 10 days. And I was responsible for caring for her. So I suffered horrific, repeated abandonment over and over and over. And so that love avoidant, the falsely empowered codependent who's love avoidant, I've worked my tail off. I'm much better, but I still freak out around those people. It's very difficult. Now, I also struggle with the very clingy, needy type because that was my mom. But here's the difference. the person who's more love addict, disempowered, codependent, like myself, they will go to therapy. They'll do anything because their primary wound is abandonment. Just don't leave me. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. The avoidant won't. And I can't survive that. And so while my skin can crawl at times, I can tell that love addict, primarily abandoned woman, hey, I'm freaking out right now. I'm putting my mom's face on you. This is my issue. I just need to let you know about it. And they're like, oh my God, okay. And you can discuss it. And that's what I need. And so all I ever picked were love avoidant, people. And so I repeated that. So I had to learn what are my morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. So I could keep my internal boundary. I could stay adult, moderate, and mature. And when I dropped into that adapted wounded child, I had a partner I could express it with, and we could talk through it. And so that's why I impress, and it's fascinating. Whenever I talk codependence, I tell people go watch those videos, and they have like 5,000 views. Nobody goes and watches them. But that you want to get good at this stuff, you want to recover, you have to become an expert in morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables, because that gives you the process to say no, and it opens the door to so many different things.
Oh, absolutely love it. Yeah, and what you said about the non-negotiables, it reminded me of also a couple of relationships in my 20s where I dated people who smoked cigarettes, and that was in my mind it was a non-negotiable. Like, well, I'm not going to date someone who smokes cigarettes. That's not in my morals and values system, and yet I did multiple times, and so I guess that was negotiable in in that sense.
Well, I don't know. That's the thing. We can look back and go, well, maybe I am okay with it. But that's what I had to look at is all these morals and values I had, were they really mine? No, they were mostly adaptations of me going along with things because that's what I learned in childhood. My job is to be the easy one, the quiet one who who allows everybody else to feel safe and secure. And if I ever have a need and want, that's a problem. And I didn't like being a problem because that meant I got even more rejection. And so I was trying to avoid that, but I realized you guarantee rejection when you live that way. And so I had to learn to, face that incorrect skew and recognize the only way you'll ever have a relationship where two people are present is when you say the single most loving word you can say to anyone, no. Do you see why it's so loving? Because there's no keeping score, there's no throwing it in their face. Like I love when I hear no. I'm so safe when someone says no to me because I know I'm not going to get hit over the head. I know I'm not going to get surprised. And so, unfortunately, books, love songs, media, TV teach us if you love somebody, you say yes to everything. That is the most abusive thing you can do to somebody. If you use that 5-step process and you think any of those things happen and you go along with it, you have just initiated abuse. We are now the abuser. And that's the thing I had to realize is when I give myself away like that, I'm the abuser, and the mistreatment I'm going to get back, I started it. I have to own that. That's on me. And once I learned how to, use that process, I stopped getting abused by people.
Any last insights, Kenny? Anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. You know me, I could talk for hours. Um, you know, I guess I'd just say, don't be too hard on yourself. We all go through all of this stuff. Nobody's immune from it. You could bring anyone you want who you think has so-called their life together. Every single person on this planet is codependent. Everyone is perfectly imperfect. Um, in 3 simple questions, you'll find out, oh my God, yeah, he's right. It's all of us. And, the question is, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And do you want to turn things around? And if you do, the only way we do that is we have to invest in ourselves. We have to see we're worthy of the investment. Because that's what codependency teaches us, we're not worthy. And so that's the first step is, choosing to make an investment in yourself, putting time, attention, and your finances behind it so that you can become you can feel safe again and be seen. That's the biggest thing is you deserve to be seen. It's your turn to be seen.